continuing Louisiana versus all y'all's trips around the state, just kind of previewing the high school football landscape as this season fast approaches. I'm Jarrett Roser, and I've got today Jake Martin from, a variety of roles up there in Northeast Louisiana, most notably Ouachita Citizen, as well as the Morning Drive. We're going to talk about some of those Monroe area, Northeast Louisiana teams, and there are some awful good ones yet again. Jake, appreciate you, man, taking some time in August to chat about some of this.
Pleasure's mine, man. Happy to finally get to sit down, and I know y'all do a lot of great stuff over there at Louisiana versus all y'all, and I've been following for years and excited to get to chat with you, man.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I think folks know I started my professional career up there with the News Star years ago. And so always look forward to whether it be seeing the teams from up there, getting a chance to talk about them a little bit. And so I've been looking forward to this one. And we might as well start with this District 25A that is probably one of my favorite districts in the state from afar, where now Neville joins the mix of what has been a great district already. And so the Northeast Louisiana teams there with Neville, West Monroe, Ruston, Ouachita, as well as Alexandria and Pineville down at Senla. There's, storylines abound there with the reigning champions of the Bearcats, Neville joining the 5A group, and West Monroe and Ouachita always strong. What are you seeing from this group as the season approaches?
I love this district too, Jared. I think if you polled most people, the Catholic League would probably be number one for most, but I think this has a really good argument for number two, just in terms of when you look at the quality of the teams, when you look at the storylines. A lot of, you being here, it's kind of interesting because when you were here, West Monroe was running that district, and it was always kind of the storyline of, can Ruston break through or can Ouachita break through? For years, West Monroe had these long win streaks over these schools. You can throw Neville in the mix too, even though Neville's been 2-4A. West Monroe's had, a win streak that went back to 1995 that ended in 2021. So all of these streaks have ended, and Ruston won the district last year. Ruston finally broke through, won the district, won the state championship. And so now it's interesting to me, Jarrett, because a lot of West Monroe fans are getting a little antsy. They're like, hey, man, we used to run this thing. Now we're chasing Ruston. And how close are we to, competing for a district title? And then, Ouachita is like a little sleeper in the district. I like what they have coming back. A lot of people know about Dylan Berryman, across the state because he's blown up recruiting-wise. But they've got a guy in A.J. Washington right next to him that combined for over 600 pounds on the defensive line. And they've been playing since they were freshmen. They're juniors now. And then you got Neville entering the fray. And I like a lot about Neville going into this year. But yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun because when you look at West Monroe and Neville specifically, they have new quarterbacks. I think that's the biggest question is, okay, what are they going to look like at quarterback? Because there's a lot of other pieces about both those teams that I really like. And then Ruston is like the flip opposite of last year where the defense had to kind of carry them. The defense was stacked, and all those guys are gone now. LSU, Louisiana Tech, Tulane. It's a star-studded group that they have to replace. And so how good are they going to be defensively? Aiden Anding is back. He's going to be kind of the ringleader there. Zarek Hill as well. But the offense might have to carry the defense early on. And, of course, Joshua Brantley's really come on and is a Tulane commit at quarterback. A lot of people saw him in the Dome. And he just progressively got better. And so I'm anxious to see Ruston, are they relying on the offense early on?
Do you look at going into this season as it's Ruston's district to win and everybody's trying to chase them now? Or is it kind of with everything that they replace? Yeah, I was going to ask, or the flip side, is it kind of wide open with all those losses to the defense?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I think, yes, I think it's Ruston's district to win. I think they should be the favorite. They are the favorite. I think they got a good chance to compete for a state title. I think they're that good. But you're right. There are some questions about the defense. And then, I think West Monroe, maybe some people are not thinking about West Monroe, and I'm talking about statewide as much just because they got upset in the first round last year. It kind of feels like a long time ago that West Monroe was really this power. Even though, I go back to 2018, Jarrett, they could have won that state title against Zachary. That would have changed a lot of history because that team was unbeaten and really, really good. But anyway, they didn't. Chris Hilton happened. And so they lost that game. And, I mean, it is what it is. But when you look at going into the season, I think West Monroe and Neville have a chance to be really good. I think West Monroe's, honestly, they're like a junior-led team. I think their year is going to be next year. But I think it's important for them to have a big run in the playoffs this year. They can't have what happened last year repeat itself. Neville, if I really knew, Parker Robinson was St. Frederick's quarterback. Andy Robinson was the head coach. He got hired over at Neville, and so his son Parker Robinson came over with him. Really good, talented young quarterback. But we didn't even see him play that much quarterback at St. Frederick, and now he's going to the deep end. And so, he's not even the starter. He's competing with Brock Jordan. That's a competition still going on. And so, very interested, like what's going to happen at quarterback, because I do think up front they'll be solid. I like their running backs. I like their receivers. And forgive me, I'm jumping all over the place. But I just think, Neville's secondary could be one of the best in the state. Like when it comes to, I'm sure like other teams might have like more 5 stars or whatever, but they got a guy in Julian Burns, who I know has SEC offers. But they have really good high school players too that have played a lot of football, including Robert Graves. Like you've got Cam Riley, who's committed to the Cajuns. You've got Juju Burns with all these different SEC offers, and Mike Collins says, no, our best football player is Robert Graves. So it's like, wow, when he said that really stood out to me. But my point there is they're going to be really, really solid at every single level of defense. Mike Collins is a great defensive coach. I love their skill. I think they're solid up front, and I really like the running backs. But the quarterback's a pretty big deal, man. If we don't know what Neville has at quarterback, I mean, it's kind of hard to predict how good Neville can be. And Neville fans are like, hey, y'all might be counting us out, but last year we should have beat Ruston. We had the state champions on the ropes. We had a special teams miscue, and they ended up taking advantage of it and beating us. But we had them. We had them on the ropes. And so they're really confident going into the new District 2-5A too.
And I know there's not going to be any shying away from anything or adjustment period for Neville fans' eyes, who, just like West Monroe, they expect to compete for championships every year. Most of the teams in this district, they've been playing, whether non-district or jamboree or whatever the fashion, they see those guys every year anyway and expect to compete with anyone. And then obviously these last couple of years with the Division I playoff breakdown. So there's not going to be any patience there expecting to wait around.
Yeah, expectations are always high, right? And that Neville's one. What's cool about Neville? We did a summer series about Legends of the Fall, and it was highlighting the greatest players in school history. And Neville was represented by just about every decade. Like Neville has consistently put out great players, great teams, and so they just expect it. And I think they're going to be really good again this year. The question is, are they good enough to take out Ruston? I have the same question about West Monroe too. Like. And Ouachita would put behind those teams. Ouachita has a lot of good skill. I think they're going to surprise some folks because they had a lot of injuries and whatnot last year. But it's a difficult district. And, we haven't even talked about Ash, who has maybe one of the best running backs in the state, and JT Lindsay. So, I mean, it's going to be fun, man. I can't wait to see every Friday night when they're in district. It's going to be a war.
No doubt. I was texting Andy Robinson the other day, telling him I was hoping to see Neville at least once or twice this year, and just trying to figure out how to fit it in. And as much as I would like to get up there for the Ruston game or West Monroe game and see a couple of those, that trip just eats up a lot for me on a Friday, and then turning around to Saturday for college. So I'm hoping to maybe catch them at Ash later on in the season. But that District 2 4A that Neville moves up from now becomes a much different looking district. Neville has run their district in 4A for so long. And so Franklin Parish, West Ouachita, and Wasman from the area, again, with some Senla teams in Tioga, Grant, and Peabody. How wide open does that district potentially look, particularly with, what Adrian Burnett and company have done in bringing Franklin Parish along? And I mean, West Ouachita has been better in recent years than they were when I was up there. Wasman has come on under Coach Cahey. And so there's a lot of opportunity for those Monroe area teams.
Yeah, I like this district a lot too. It's not as deep. I don't think, even though Mike Rainwater is quick to point out, hey man, everybody in our district went to the playoffs last year. So he's kind of been banging that drum. But I like those three teams you just mentioned. Franklin Parrish is really building something. Desarian Ellis, the quarterback, he's back. And, I know Adrian Burnett's really high on what they return, and they're going to have some solid guys up front, too. West Ouachita is a team that, never really had a chance, I don't think, in District 2-5A, but they're still solid. Like, they're a solid football team. I don't think they ever should have been in 5A, but now if they're in 4A, competing against these teams, they play a physical brand of football. They've got a quarterback who's a senior. He's been playing since he was a freshman with Sam Ozark. MJ Owens is a little bowling ball at fullback. I love watching him play. Luke Jones on defense is a playmaker for them all over the field. Their defense has a chance to be really good. And their defense was really good last year, even playing in District 2-5A. I think I counted there was like 7 games where they gave up 20 or fewer points last season. So they return a lot of those guys. And then you look at Wassman, and I love what Wassman has returned. Wassman broke through last year. Terrence Cahey's a great coach, doing a great job at Wassman. And if you look at what they bring back, it's a lot of familiar names. They got to replace their backfield. They lost Trey Mason, who's a standout receiver, to Bastrop. He transferred to Bastrop. Great basketball player, too. I'm sure most people probably know him from basketball. But I still like what they return. Defensively, their secondary is going to be stout. They got a guy in R.J. Wilson who's made play after play. Keyshawn Hines, he's getting some looks from colleges. Fred Clark recently committed to ULM, and Keyshawn Hines actually got an offer from Grambling. So, it's really they got a lot of great players, and so you look at it, physicality. If you like physicality, that district's for you. I think West Ouachita versus Wassman is going to be a rock'em sock'em robot affair. And Franklin Parish could be the favorite just with what they return. But I think those three are going to have some battles.
Yeah, those three, and then you mentioned all those teams having gone to the playoffs. The Senla teams and what Harry Coleman and company have done at Peabody. Tioga has been consistent in recent years, and so it's going to be a lot of fun on a lot of Friday nights, the back half of the season for that 4A group.
It's so much different than last year and the last several years. It's been Neville. We used to joke with Mike Collins, like, we'll see you in the front half, and then the second half, we won't make it out to the stadium because it's going to be blowouts. But it's not going to be that case this year.
And then in 3A, you mentioned Trey Mason now at Bastrop. Bastrop has an influx of some notable talent from other schools, including one of their district rivals there now in 1-3A, Sterlington, with the Downs brothers heading up to Bastrop. And so you've got Bastrop, Carroll, Richwood, Sterlington, a lot of familiar teams. Haven't always all been in the same district, but they're together now with North Webster from out in the west half of the state. And that's another, with some of the movement there and Union Parish moving down and whatnot, it looks like a district that Sterlington should be primed to lead. But there's some talented potentially spoilers in that group.
Yeah. We used to talk about this district a lot when it was Union, Sterlington, and then Wassman really came on. Carroll's had some really strong years. Richwood a few years back, but I think the district got a lot weaker. Union moving out, Wassman moving up. So you would think it kind of opens it up for Sterlington. Here's my thing about Sterlington. You mentioned the Downs brothers. They lose Dylan Downs, going to be a senior quarterback. Devin Downs, fantastic athlete, baseball and football. So you lose those guys, and they go to Bastrop. And so they immediately make Bastrop better. We mentioned Trey Mason going to Bastrop. He immediately makes Bastrop better. Tank Washington's a really good coach. We saw what he did at Carroll and how structured Carroll became. That 2022 Carroll team, which was really special before they were upset in the first round, that was Tank's team. Like, Tank built that and then left right before the season. So that was kind of like what he was building towards. He's starting to kind of do the same thing at Bastrop if you're paying attention. Like this season, Bastrop has a chance to be really, really good. Now, North Webster's kind of come on. I think North Webster has a chance to be pretty good. But Sterlington, their issue is going to be, can they weather the storm? I think they play 4 Division I teams in the first 5 weeks or something like that. And so with a new starting quarterback, with some questions, they have to place a lot of guys on defense too. They could have some bumps in the road early, but talking with Lee Doty, he's like, look, we just got to stay focused. He's like, by the time we get into district play, I think we got a chance to be really good, but we're going to have a lot of inexperienced players playing early on. And so they got to kind of get their feet wet and get settled, get into a groove, and he thinks they can be really good come playoff time, which that doesn't surprise any of us. Sterlington's always, a contender. So I think that's, watch out for Sterlington late, but don't be surprised if you look up and you see Sterlington's like 3-2 or something like that. That won't be a complete shot just because of what they have to replace.
It's always interesting when you have a team like that schedules tough and then has a lot of new faces. You mentioned weather the storm. Just see how those guys react and keep focused and not potentially get down on themselves or run into, knock on wood, any injury risks when you're playing a bunch of bigger, deeper teams and stuff like that. And so it'll be interesting to watch how they come out of that early season stretch. I don't know a ton about Bastrop other than some of those guys that have transferred to there. And I mean, you mentioned some of the coaching dynamic. I feel like from afar, they're going to put up a lot of points on a lot of people. Is that pretty fair to assume?
Yeah. In fact, Dylan Downs himself was kind of hitting me up. He was sending me a bunch of videos of him throwing the ball and just a bunch of touchdowns, like in practice and stuff. And it's like, I see you, man. I know I'm looking out for you. I know what to expect from you. But I think they're going to put up a lot of points. And like I said, Tank Washington's a good coach, and he's kind of built this thing up. And Bastrop's never. I think Bastrop's still probably, if you ask Tank Washington, he might say, we're still trying to get more people to come out and play. Bastrop's one of those schools where you have athletes everywhere, and they're roaming the halls. Some of them come out and play, some of them don't. So he probably wants a few more. But I think when Bastrop's like, how people used to talk about LSU and those Les Miles teams and how they just look different. I think Urban Meyer said that on Colin Cowherd before. Like LSU would run out, they just look different. Bastrop's always kind of had those kind of kids where, let's not forget that's where Lance Hurd came from, right? I mean, those kind of kids were just like, who is that? I remember seeing him as a freshman at Bastrop, and I was like, who is that? It was a scrimmage, and they said, oh, that's a freshman. I said, no, I'm talking about him. And they're like, no, I know, he's a freshman. And I couldn't believe it. But they just have kids like that, man. But, yeah, I think they're going to be pretty good, man. Question is whether or not Tank Washington kind of make it all gel. I think he can. And, man, when you add Dylan Downs, Devin Downs, and Trey Mason, that's a shot in the arm if there was one. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think people are going to be surprised / impressed by the way Dylan can sling it around after watching him lead that run-heavy offense at Sterlington, but he can definitely do so. In 2A, you have a couple of different districts to kind of keep an eye on, and both of them have reigning state champions in them with Union Parish and Darbone Woods Charter with the Shreveport group in 1-2A, and then Oak Grove and more of those Monroe area, Northeast Louisiana teams, Oak Grove, Ouachita Christian, Mangum, Faraday, and that whole group, Beekman Charter, Delhi Charter, Rayville. Are we looking at some potential state championship caliber teams again particularly when you talk about the Farmers and the Tigers up in Oak Grove and possibly OCS, the Eagles?
Okay, so Union has got to go through Calvary, right? And that's what's so interesting. I mean, obviously they play different, but like in that district, I can't wait to see them match up. And they've matched up before, but that's fun that you got district implications on it. OCS, I used to love this district. We got it for a little bit when it was Faraday and OCS and all them together. Faraday's going to be really good. Oak Grove is the favorite. I think hands down what they return. They got a lot of guys back from their state championship team. You look at OCS, man, they've got Luke Vidrine back at quarterback. They got to replace a lot of guys, including 9 guys on defense. And I was visiting with Stephen Fitzhugh the other day, and he was like, people don't realize that senior class that they just had lost 6 games. 5 of those games were the state champions, which is kind of mind-boggling. Like 5 of their losses came to state champions. And so that was a special group, like really good, especially defensively. And so they've got a lot of question marks. They got a kid in Macon Leonard, who's a running back, got some time last year. I think he's going to kind of burst onto the scene. But what little we saw of him, he's really fast. I mean, I think he runs like a 4.4. But he's a really fast, athletic kid that if he gets to the perimeter, he can take it to the house. So I think he's going to kind of explode on the scene. But there's just a lot of questions, man. I don't know. OCS is one of those teams that you kind of bank on every year. Like they're going to be good, they're going to figure it out, and they do such a good job of coaching those guys up and kind of figuring things out. So I wouldn't dare say that OCS is going to be bad by any means, but playing in that district, it's hard to pick them over in Oak Grove. And I think Faraday is going to catch a lot of people off guard too. They've got some really good guys coming back too, that I think are going to kind of explode on the scene. Mangum also, you cannot leave Mangum out. They got Isaiah McFarland returning in the backfield. He's a hoss, and I know, if you look at what they've done through the years, they've kind of been knocking. They almost beat Oak Grove last year in the playoffs. I think that was 31-30 ball game. So I mean, they got some studs coming back. So I'm really excited about that district. As far as Union goes, they lose quite a bit, but they return some really key pieces like Tyquarius Wilson, who is a two-time All-State guy. They returned a young offensive. Well, they were young last year, but that was one of the things we talked about a lot last season is how young that offensive line was and how they just kind of got better and better and better. And they're coming back. And so they should be really, really good up front offensively. Question is, what's the quarterback situation look like? Is there a state title hangover for them? I don't expect there to be, but you're in a really difficult district. And, man, look at their schedule. They play in a lot of really good teams this year. When you kind of look at their non-district, in fact, I wrote some of these down. Look, the schedule's crazy. North DeSoto, Ash, and Airline in consecutive weeks to start the season. Like, come on. Plus, that district's really good.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I mean, those two districts and some of those teams you mentioned once we get eventually to playoff time in November and see kind of where they are in their progression. And then similarly, you have a couple of 1A districts where some of the teams over to the west side, particularly getting out to Lincoln Parish and whatnot, are situated with some Shreveport rivals in district. That 1A is Arcadia, Cedar Creek, Glenbrook, Haynesville, Jonesboro Hodge, Lincoln Prep, Plain Dealing, and Ringgold. And then more to the east side of the state, you have the Block, Delhi Charter, General Trask, St. Fred, and Tensas, which St. Fred right now has to be looking around and saying, of all the fluctuations through the years, and now we don't have Oak Grove, OCS, Mangum, any of those guys with us anymore. And so there's a real opportunity from a district standpoint for those guys. When you look at some of the 1A teams in the northeast portion of the state, what kind of stands out? Because as much as we talk about some additions to some other programs, St. Frederick is one that has a lot of guys that are now heading elsewhere that they're going to have to replace.
Yeah, they fascinate me this year. They've got a new head coach and Chip Miller back. We talked about Andy Robinson going to Neville, and he counted it up for me. 14 guys that would have been eligible to play this year have left. It's a lot of players, especially for a 1A school. And we're talking about, your starting backfield, Caden Miller at receiver. Plus, you always got the question mark of William Patrick. Like, will William Patrick play? That last year, I had those conversations with Andy throughout the year about William Patrick, and he was like, he's going to play. I'm telling you, he's going to play. And I'm like, it's week 8. I don't think he's going to play, Andy. And then he ends up playing against Cedar Creek right at the end there. But for those of you who don't know, he's committed to LSU, great baseball player. He's one of those athletes that could be good at anything he wants to be. But Chip Bodeback he practiced a little bit with Chip, and Chip's like, I want him out here. Like, I'd love to have him out here with us. So, will they be able to kind of weather that storm? They still got some really good players coming back. St. Frederick does, but this could have been the year. If you're looking at OCS kind of and I know they're out of the district, but if it would have all been the same, OCS kind of has some question marks this year. And, the district's not exactly a strong one. You just kind of went through those teams there. I still think St. Frederick has a chance to win this district. Maybe Delta Charter is a team that could push them to win it. But overall, I think St. Frederick has a great chance to win it. And this is after losing all those players, because defensively, they still got some really good players coming back. Most notably, Sam Police, Simeon, Owen O'Neill, Daryl Cooper. They've got some guys, but the question is, can they figure it out offensively after losing your entire backfield and losing one of your key playmakers in Caden Miller and possibly not ever having William Patrick? Who knows if he will suit up this year?
Yeah, the William Patrick deal has been so interesting because obviously, to be as talented of a baseball player as you have to be an LSU commit, he's someone that I think in a solid 2025 football recruiting class in Louisiana is probably a top 40 or 50 guy in the state. And that's, being potentially conservative.
Well,
And
Jared, I've had so many conversations with people who ask me, they're like, could he play football? And I'm like, yeah, he could.
yeah,
Like I'm not, it sounds silly to say he could be as good a football player as baseball player, right? We know that the upper echelon gets recruited by LSU. Like LSU comes knocking, you got to be special. But I'm telling you, man, I saw this guy, and I know it's 1A, but man, we saw him make plays on both sides of the ball. I think 2 or 3 years ago, he had over 100 tackles on defense, and he's high pointing the ball on offense. And I was talking with Chip Builderback. He's like, we practiced him some at quarterback, and I was like, oh my gosh, this kid's a natural. He could start right now for us at quarterback. So, just saying, he is one of those guys that whatever he kind of puts his mind to, I think he could be great at. He's a great track star too. But he'd be a weapon if you could get him out there, man. He'd give you a big shot in the arm.
There you go, Jake, man. I appreciate it. Thanks again for taking some time.
Absolutely, man. Really enjoyed it, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Maybe around playoff time, we can kind of look at where things are with everything divided up the way it is now. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to try and break up looking at playoff stuff yet because everything gets crisscrossed at the end of the year anyway.
That's what I was doing too when I was thinking about the state championships with Union. I'm like, wait a minute, let me remember this now. Calvary's over here. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, but again, he's Jake Martin from Ouachita Citizen in the Morning Drive. Make sure to keep up with everything he's doing, covering the Northeast area, up in that region, that quadrant of the state. And for Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.